back to our daily questions with Kirsty, an exclusive for Indie Live Extra channel viewers. Today's question, and it's one that comes up quite a lot: would EFTA be better than the EU? Would that solve our border issues? Does the UK have an EFTA trade deal already that would help? So let's find out.
I think it is more complicated than that. So, of course, there may be scarce stories, but there is also reality. So, and if you think back to Brexit and everything a lot of us said about Brexit and putting a border between the UK and the rest of the EU being a very bad idea, well, it was a very bad idea, okay? So the UK has not stopped trading with the EU, but it has put bureaucracy and costs in the way, and a huge number of smaller firms have stopped trading with the EU. So there are border challenges, and there will be some border costs, but that doesn't stop you. I think people sort of go to black and white extremes sometimes. We're not going to stop trading with the UK. The question is just, what will the costs be of putting eventually an EU external border between Scotland and the rest of the UK? And there are no magic fixes to that. You know, you've got two borders once you're independent that you're most concerned about, the one to the EU and the one to the rest of the UK. And as you take down one, you're going to increase the other. That's not true in all areas, notably in free movement of people. If you're in the EU, you get back our lost free movement of people and the right to live and work and travel freely across the UK. But if we're in the common travel area with Ireland and the UK, then we'll have that freedom of movement. So that's actually a win-win. But in other areas, for instance, manufactured goods, interestingly, Scotland exports, although it exports more to the UK than to the EU, it exports more or less the same amount of manufactured goods to the EU as it does to the rest of the UK. So if you take away, say, a 5% cost of now exporting to the EU, but you put on a 5%, I'm just making that figure up, a small cost of exporting manufactured goods to the rest of the UK, and the goods are the same amount, then there's no net cost. And in fact, with the EU being a much, much bigger market than the rest of the UK, and perhaps Scotland would be very attractive to foreign direct investment, you could argue that's a potential plus. Yeah. And so a big chunk of, or the biggest chunk of Scotland's trade with the rest of the UK is services. So the real question, you have to come down a level from that, just that, oh, we trade 3 times more with the rest of the UK than the EU, to the question of how will we manage services trade? What will the barriers be? Will we have to set up agreement on mutual recognition of qualifications? Yeah. Certainly, that ought to be relatively easy, because we've already got different education systems, but we work, throughout the UK and so on. So it should be a lot easier, I think, to sort out some parts of services trade than it is for the UK, having cut itself off from 27 other countries. But there are some costs, and there's no way around it. Yeah. So to come back to the EFTA question, you do have to decide, as an independent Scotland, where you are trying to get to. So you're day one, and you're going to have been thinking about this since the vote and as you negotiate.
I don't think it'll happen on day one. We'll all be recovering from the hangover.
Yeah. No, absolutely. But on day one of independence, if you're no longer part of the UK-EU trade and cooperation agreement, so the trade deal, how are you going to trade with the EU? How are you going to continue trading with the EU? And on what basis, under World Trade Organization rules and everything else, do you then trade with the rest of the UK? So unless you want there to be some instant sort of barriers in both directions, there is it may only be a few months, but you will need to have planned ahead. So it won't matter if you have a hangover on the day, because you'll have planned.
It's interesting, isn't it? There's a lot said on social media about EFTA and EU and making comparisons, and then you hear the person who has all the detail, and grasps all the detail, and it's there, and there's pathways to either. At some point, we have to make a decision, but maybe it's not as simple as some people would make out.
Nothing ever is it?
Nothing ever is it?
Join us tomorrow and let's see what tomorrow's question is.
Yes, this was a bit of a follow-on from the previous one, because, you know, we'll win the referendum and then we're entering into negotiations with the UK government. But at that point, there's lots of other things to do, and we just go through what some of those things are. So that will be tomorrow, and hope you come back to watch it.